Welcome to session number 28 of an introduction to biblical prophecy. I'm Dr. John McMath. I'm joined here by my friends in Italy and in the Philippines. We've been studying together for about 3 years now since the COVID hysteria hit the world. There's got to be some silver linings to every dark cloud. And so I guess these sessions are a part of that silver lining. We've been working our way through the book of Revelation, and we've begun opening seals, which have led to the conclusion of the matter with the sixth seal, which unleashes the ultimate catastrophe on the earth. It would appear, that's just my opinion, that the seven seals of this first scroll unroll the 7-year tribulation period, the so-called tribulation period, a period that's predicted by Daniel in his prophecy of the 70th week. So 70 weeks, countdown to the triumphal entry of Christ in Jerusalem in roughly 30 AD. The 70th week is the conclusion of history and the beginning of the Messianic kingdom in Jerusalem. And that obviously didn't happen in 37 AD. We can read the history and we know that. Many scholars have approached this issue of the gap between the 69th and the 70th week by assuming that it's all symbolic, it's all allegorical, and it's really talking about the birth of the church. That the sufferings of the book of Revelation are actually just allegorical language about the persecution that came down on the church in the first several hundred years. Those of us who believe that the best way to understand the Bible is to take the words literally have a difficult problem, because these predictions that we see in the book of Revelation do not appear to have been literally fulfilled at any time in history. If we reject the allegorical or spiritualizing method of interpretation, then we're looking for a future fulfillment. The book of Daniel clearly says that this 70th week comes immediately before the Messianic kingdom age, the second coming of Christ, and the kingdom age, which we know from this book of Revelation to be a 1,000-year period. That has not literally happened. And therefore, if it is to be understood literally, it is still yet to come. It is still going to happen. That's the basic logic. By taking this logic to its conclusion, among other things, we're demonstrating a faithfulness to the actual words of Scripture, which I believe is important to do. And secondly, we see in this book of Revelation a fulfilling of Old Testament prophecy and a pattern of behaviors and of relationships in the world that we can take note of. So the development of a totalitarian antichrist mentality on the earth is something that we should be watching out for. It won't happen just once. It will be evidence of the ongoing um, destructive work of Satan in the world. And there are movements within sinful humanity that can be only thought of as satanically destructive. Matter of fact, I was just studying the other day Hamas, which is the Arabic name for the terrorist organization that runs Gaza in Israel, that has been supported by an equally evil Iranian uh, Shiite Muslim uh, country, Iran. And Hamas is a word in Arabic that means destruction. The very word, the name of their organization is destruction. And it's notable that they build nothing of value. They've had a generation to build a state, and yet they've built nothing. Now, we find this in many other places in the world where human organizations and political movements are primarily destructive rather than building something of lasting value. Only within the Judeo-Christian tradition have lasting good things been built. So we see throughout all of history there is definitely a Christ Antichrist dichotomy. This is a bipolar kind of a world with lots of flavors in the middle, but the two poles are obvious. And we see that living on into the 70th week of Daniel. So this unfolding uh, suggests that the church is taken out. The church, which is the moderating influence, which is the powerful influence of the Holy Spirit within the world, is taken up out of the way, and sinful men are allowed to be as sinful as they want to be and as destructive as they want to be. So what we find on the earth during this time is widespread destruction. Now, some have argued that the elements of the last time events in tribulation are entirely man-made. Uh, I don't agree with that. Uh, I think it's possible that some elements of the end time events are the result of human sinfulness. I think that's obviously clear. Uh, but I think the fundamental power behind many of these things is Satan. Satan is finally allowed a free uh, opportunity to do what he does best, and that's to destroy. His name is Apollyon, the destroyer. And so he's going to come into the world doing this genuinely evil thing. Now, at the same time, there is a God layer in all of it. And what God is truly doing in this tribulation period is releasing Satan to do his damage, and that damage will, in fact, be the wrath of God on the world. Now, some elements of what we see during the tribulation period is entirely a God thing. I think not as much of it as some interpreters would have us believe, but I think quite a lot is utterly God-ordained miraculous wrath. But much of it can be explained by Satan's malevolent, destructive influence amongst the people of the earth who have rejected Christ. So that's where I'm coming from. We'll see how that works out. Let's see if we can share the screen, and we'll take it down to and I've got two of these. Okay, that's the one I want. Sometimes it's hard. Let's see if it'll come up for us. There we go. Okay, the this slide is one that we looked at last time, and the sixth seal really opens up the concluding catastrophe. The seven seals, as I suspect you'll recall, unfold the week. You've got the four horsemen. This is the Antichrist and his wars, the sickness, the famine, the death, the destruction that follow. So the four horsemen begin the sequence. The fifth seal is the horrendous persecution. The souls of the martyrs under the altar in heaven. These, I believe, are martyrs coming out of the Great Tribulation. These do not appear to be the church. The church is already represented by the 24 elders. It's and the martyrs under the altar do not appear to be altars of the or martyrs from the early church. They appear to have come out of the tribulation by dying. So this is that's a tough interpretation, but I think that's the simplest when we put it all together. The sixth seal then describes this ultimate and concluding catastrophe. If men were responsible for this closing catastrophe, it would be a nuclear confrontation of some kind. And that's why the term apocalyptic has come into common usage of the concluding nuclear war. You look at some of these things. The earthquake. An earthquake is a shock in the Earth's crust that runs at a very high speed through the rock itself, knocking buildings down and doing that sort of thing. In the Philippines, we're used to earthquakes. This will be a really big, bad earthquake. Amongst the kinds of weapons that mankind is capable of, only nuclear weapons can produce an earthquake. So if man is involved in these things, it would require something the equivalent of nuclear weapons to make this happen. The black sun and the red moon are related and have to do with the clouds of debris, the fallout, the smoke, the powdered rock and powdered cities thrown up into the air by these gigantic explosions. If that's what it is, it could be done some other way. We could get earthquakes, a black sun, and a red moon in a purely miraculous event where God simply removes the light of the sun, darkens the moon. It's entirely possible, and I'm not discounting that possibility. I think it's a more impacting interpretation to assume that this is the destructive work of man. And if that is true, then something to understand is that this was never possible prior to the middle of the 20th century. So we are in the first century of mankind being able to destroy much of civilization using this kind of technology. It's never been possible before. There are a lot of other things that are the result of human technology that allow for the fulfillment of prophecy. So knowledge will increase and people will go to and fro. Knowledge increases because, first of all, there's the possibility of printing, and then the possibility of communication using the internet. The the internet, what we're using right now to share information and knowledge, is uh, orders of magnitude larger and more impactful than the Gutenberg invention of movable type. Movable type expanded knowledge and learning exponentially over hand copied manuscripts. So we see this, to use the term, explosion of knowledge, and that's getting more and more, as just growing. That's only been possible in our lifetimes, and it's a genuinely amazing thing. The idea of travel, men will go to and fro. Oscar and I were just talking as we got started here about uh, uh, he and Sally and Mama Norma coming to America. 100 years ago, that would not have been possible. It would have been a very, very long boat ride. But today, we make a few phone calls, plug in a credit card number, and we can arrange for a trip halfway around the world. And it's this technology that makes it possible for the church to reach to the uttermost parts of the earth, to the farthest corners, the hardest to reach places. I train missionary pilots. I give them the theology part of their missionary experience, and they will fly actual Bible translating and Bible teaching missionaries out to the various places where they go. This was never possible prior to 100 years ago. This could not have been done. But today it's routine. We can do this. A lot of the things that we see in the book of Revelation were once unthinkable, could only be understood as the allegory of a great persecution. Today we can see the technology and the human determination to do these things. It's quite the amazing thing. I'm gonna do another mute here. There we go. There we go. So all of this stuff, the sixth seal is a really, really descriptive thing. My favorite part of it is that the ruling elite, the kings and rulers of the earth, will hide themselves in the caves of the earth and will call out for mercy, something they were never too happy about giving to the rest of us. Uh, the the elite ruling class is not all professional politicians. There are many who simply have amassed a great fortune and thus have tremendous control over people. And these, of course, are people who really have nothing but disdain for those of us common folks who go out and work for a living. They've made their fortunes, and they can afford to tell the rest of us to eat bugs and live within walking distance of where we want to go. Um, so I don't like them much. Okay, so all of this stuff is a part of the sixth seal, and I would say that the sixth seal takes us up to the end of the tribulation period, and that the events are a part of the concluding sequence of battles that, in general, we're going to call the Battle of Armageddon. So, first set of seals takes us all the way through the seven. All right, let's see if I can make it to the next slide. There's an interlude in between the sixth and the seventh seals. The seventh seal is really the introduction of the trumpet sequence. The trumpet sequence is the second judgment sequence in Revelation, and we're going to see that in the next session. So we've got an interlude in the seals, and this is in chapter 7 and the first 17 verses. But I'm going to start out here in the beginning in verses 1 through 3, which is kind of sets up the situation that's going on here. And after this, I saw 4 angels. This is 7:1, standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, so that no wind would blow on the earth or on the sea or on any tree. Okay, so there's a quiet sequence. The wind stops blowing all over the earth, and this is clearly a supernatural thing because it's being done by 4 angels. This is deliberate, and God is providing a moment of quiet. And I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun, having the seal of the living God. And he cried out with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, "Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the bondservants of our God on their foreheads." Okay. Now, this is interesting. So we've got some saved people on the earth. The real question is this Christians, or is this Jews, or is this what is this the church? And those who hold to a mid-tribulational rapture will argue that these folks are the church coming out of the Great Tribulation. What we can say for sure, well, we can't ever say anything for sure, but this is an angelic thing, and the command from the angel is, "Don't harm the earth or the sea until these bondservants of God have been sealed on their foreheads." Okay, so there's a sealing that's going to go on for protection. And this is, I suspect, related to the rest of the chapter, which is the introduction of the 144,000 Jews who are called out, and a mixed multitude of the Gentile nations from every tongue and language and people group all over the world. Okay, so who would these people be? They're interesting. And as we walk through this material, we're going to ask the question, could this be the church? Because if it is, then we're going to have to change our theology of the timing of the rapture, which I'm willing to do if that's what it calls for. I actually don't think that this is the church, and I'll show you why as we walk in. So beginning in verse 4, the 144,000. Now there's a cult in America that we call the Jehovah's Witnesses. And they're typically really nice people. One of my favorite Ford mechanics is a Jehovah's Witness. He's actually an Italian fella, And he was introduced to the Jehovah's Witnesses in Italy on a trip. His aunt in Italy is a Jehovah's Witness. Very interesting. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Jesus is not God, that he is a God of some sort, and I'm not sure quite how they logically make that work, but they believe that Jesus isn't God, and you're saved by doing the good work of publishing the kingdom. And so the kingdom started in the mid 1800s at some time, and so we're in the kingdom, and the kingdom has nothing to do with Jesus. He's just uh, he was just a good man. Anyway, Jehovah's Witnesses are an interesting group, and they believe that the original 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses back in the 1800s are the ones who actually go to heaven, and nobody else gets to go to heaven. Uh, that's quite obviously not what the passage says, but that's what they believe. That's interesting. So, who are these guys really? Let's look at the passage and see if it gives us any clues at all. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. Well, golly, that sounds like Jews. It doesn't sound like the church at all. From the tribe of Judah, 12,000 sealed. From the tribe of Reuben, 12,000. From the tribe of Gad, 12,000. And this goes on through all of the 12 tribes of Israel, 12,000 from each tribe. And you multiply 12 times 12, 144,000 people. Later on, we're going to discover that these are all men. We can assume whatever we'd like. Perhaps they're married guys, and so their wives are just not counted, or they could all be single. The later passages that come back to these suggest that they are single men, they are unmarried, and that they're protected during this sequence of the tribulation period for the purpose of bearing witness to the truth. So they're preaching the good news of the immediacy of the kingdom of Christ. They're an interesting group any way you take them, and they're protected during this sixth seal episode. And that's going to pop up later. Okay, so the sixth seal is deflected from the group here in chapter 7. 144,000, and these are clearly Jews. And they are also clearly believers in the Messiah. So we're going to see 144,000 believing Jews, Jews for Jesus. Interesting group. In verse 9, we see the sequence continuing. This is a multitude, a mixed multitude. After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could count, from every nation and all tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands. Okay, just to give it actually a lot of details in this verse, and they're all significant. So we've got a great multitude which no one could count. Usually this refers to just a very, very large number of people. We don't know how many, from every nation and tribe and people group and language. Okay, this is Gentiles. This is not any more Jews. We've got 144,000 Jews, which is a great number. The mixed multitude in 9 through 17 is Gentiles. These are people from everywhere, literally everywhere, every nation and tribe and people group and language. There are languages which have not been reached with the gospel, language groups in places all around the world. We're still working on that. The scholars who do these things uh, can tell you just exactly how many languages there are and how many language groups have yet to be reached with the gospel. This suggests that every language group, every people group, every nation and tribe will be reached. Now, that obviously hasn't happened yet. So we're looking at something that's future. The allegorical understanding of this completely misses the point uh, and becomes nonsense. Uh, I won't. I won't proclaim that I understand every bit of this, uh, but uh, at least my understanding of it makes a certain amount of sense. To say that this is the church and this is the situation of the church at the um, beginning of the church age, I think is a little silly. I don't think there's any possibility of this. That there were those in the early church by the fourth and fifth centuries who believed that the rise of Constantine the Great as the emperor of Rome and the decree that Christianity was the legal religion of the Roman Empire were in fact the coming out from the Great Tribulation. Um, that never did make very good sense. As history has continued, it's become obvious that that's not true. There have been lots and lots of other persecutions. There have been, and there are still languages and tribes and people groups that have not been reached, that we're still trying to reach. So, I think, fairly important distinction there. And they're standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes. The white robes are symbolic of holiness. So they're holy and forgiven, standing before the throne. This is a good thing. This is the position of a judgment for rewards. Here are people who are clearly believers. They've come to worship. They brought the palm branches, which are the symbol of worship or adoration. So these are believers. There's no question about it. But they don't fit the pattern of the church. As it goes on, they're crying out with a loud voice, saying, "Salvation to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." Okay, so salvation belongs to God. That's a good thing to start out with. And all the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders, the 24 elders, which represent probably the church and Judaism of the whole prior period of history. And they're all crying out. All the angels were around the throne, and the four living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, Amen, blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen. There's a modern worship song that uses that verse. And then one of the elders answered, saying to me, "These who are clothed in the white robes, who are they, and where have they come from?" Okay, this is a question to John. And John says, I think quite wisely. He says, "My Lord, you know." In other words, John wasn't willing to make a guess. You know, I love the modern scholars who will take a wild guess about who this crowd is. But it says, "Oh Lord, you know." And he answered, "These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation, and they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." Okay, so these are clearly believers. These are clearly people who have put their faith in Christ. They are mentioned in the same passage with the 144,000 Jewish believers. Uh, this multitude have come out of the Great Tribulation. If we compare this with the description of the rapture in 1 Thessalonians 5. First Thessalonians 5, where the Lord will descend with a shout, with no previous warning, as imminent coming out of nowhere. He'll descend, and with the trumpet of the archangel, the dead in Christ will rise first, and we who are alive and remain at that time will go up with them to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will ever be with the Lord. If, in fact, the rapture was something that takes place part of the way through the tribulation period, Paul would not have said something to the effect of, "Therefore encourage one another with these words." Those who have dead will have escaped all of this tribulation, and we'll meet them in the air after we've been through 6 years of absolutely excruciating, horrible trouble. That's not what Paul says. Paul says that we're not destined for wrath, but rather Christ delivers us from the wrath which is coming. I would argue that the chapters detailing all of the seals fit under the rubric. These are the seals that reveal the wrath of God. The whole thing is the wrath of God. These people are those who went into that period as unbelievers. They did not go up with the rapture. And now they've gone through these first years of tribulation, and they've repented of their sin. There's 144,000 Jews and a mixed multitude all over the world who have turned to Christ and are coming out of the Great Tribulation, probably as martyrs. I don't see a description of how they come out, but they appear to be coming out as martyrs. It's an entirely different experience. This is not the rapture. And so they said, "My Lord, who are," he said, "you know," and he said, "These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation. They washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." So there's a forgiveness for sin. For this reason, they are before the throne of God, and they serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will spread his tabernacle over them. They will hunger no longer, nor thirst any more, nor will the sun beat down on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb in the center of the throne will be their shepherd and will guide them to springs of the water of life, and God will wipe every tear from their eyes. That last line is important. For those who are in this group have experienced tremendous, heart-rending, crushing tribulation. They've come through 6 years of the wrath of God. They've seen friends and relatives dead in the street. They've seen the destruction of cities, and one way or another they've survived that and repented. They've come to Christ in the midst of these horrors before they died, and were taken up into heaven. So this is not the rapture. This is the death of martyrs during the tribulation period. Again, it's a detail of interpretation, and I could be wrong. The mid-trib approach has very few backers because it doesn't fit very well with most of the evidence. But they are out there. They are still out there, and this is the primary passage that they use. This takes us on into the beginning of chapter 8 and the seventh seal. Okay, when the Lamb, this is 8:1. When the Lamb broke the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Now, that's a that's a pretty big deal. There's silence in heaven. The sixth seal appears to be this climactic moment, this horrible, terrible, really, truly no good afternoon. Just a bunch of bad stuff happening. It's the climactic destruction of the earth. And following that, the seventh seal is broken. There's silence. And then we're introduced to the seven angels with seven trumpets. So there's the silence is a silence perhaps of mourning, perhaps of just contemplation of what has happened here. This is looking back at the tribulation period. Believers and non-believers alike will recognize the catastrophic, crushing destruction of the wrath of God, and the ultimate effects of sin on the world. It's a really, really bad thing, in other words. And so we're introduced here to seven angels, verse 2, who stand before God. These are perhaps the seven spirits of God. The seven trumpets are given to these seven angels. So now we're going to get a brass septet. Seven trumpet players are going to come up, and another angel came and stood at the altar, holding a golden censer, and much incense was given to him, so that he might add it to the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up before God out of the angel's hand. Okay, that's an interesting little detail, and it explains the beginning of a tradition in Roman Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox churches of the use of incense during worship. In the traditional churches during Mass and at other times, one of the priests or perhaps one of the assistants at the service will have a bowl of coals with incense. Incense is aromatic, burnable stuff. comes from a variety of Eastern plants. Frankincense is one of the classic incense materials, and that burns and produces a relatively sweet smoke. I've never been fond of incense. Some people really like it. It's never been one of my favorite things, but some people like it. We see incense in use all the way back into the Old Testament. The tabernacle had an altar of incense at the curtain that divided the holy place from the Holy of Holies. So this is a very traditional thing. So we've got a golden censer, which would be the pot containing the hot coals, and incense burning. And this represents or is symbolic of the prayers of the saints. Uh, as as we pray, we can think of our prayers going up to God as a sweet smelling smoke. Uh, and again, that's not my favorite smell, but that's the image that comes to the front here. And it's what people of the time probably would have recognized, because the incense was used in the temple. Uh, and so we're seeing that the whole episode, there's silence in heaven. We've got 7 angels with trumpets, and the prayers of the saints are bathing this process uh, as the incense rises before the throne of God. So God's people are directly involved, and God Himself is directly involved, the angelic host directly involved. What's going to happen in this next sequence, the 7 trumpets, is primarily uh, during the second half of the tribulation period. And as we open this up, here it is, and the angel, verse 5, took the censer, filled it with fire, and threw it on to the earth, and there followed peals of thunder and sounds and flashings of lightning and an earthquake. Okay, uh, all of that is a kind of a climactic bit. We're going to have thunder and lightning. Okay, the thunderstorm is a really quite destructive uh, meteorological event. Thunderstorms happen when you get a combination of moisture and uh, heat, moving air. Sometimes it requires a mountain to get it moving. Other times it just moves because rising air moves, and you get a vertical motion of the clouds. And the clouds get higher and higher and higher, and eventually it gets up to the point where hail is produced, and the hail coming back down and the wind shear produced in the thunderstorm makes lightning and thunder, and it can be very destructive. Uh, when I was learning to fly, our instructors always told us, uh, do your very best not ever to come within 20 nautical miles of a thunderstorm. Uh, doesn't matter what kind of airplane you're flying, stay away from the things because they will definitely break your airplane. And it's a very good way to die quickly. So we're told stay away from it. So thunder and lightning and an earthquake. Some interpreters of this passage have again introduced nuclear weapons. I keep showing you pictures of nuclear weapons because they make bad or they make good backgrounds for what we're talking about. But the noise, the rest of it. But actually, this is thunderstorms accompanied by an earthquake, and the 7 angels who had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound them. So here they're wiggling the keys a little bit, and they're blowing without buzzing their lips to warm up the trumpet. They're getting ready, and here it comes. And the seven angels are doing their things. I'm going to finish off today's lecture with this slide. We've seen this slide before, and I want to remind you again. The book of Revelation starts out with a sequence of seven, the seven churches. And the church age appears to come to a conclusion after the seven churches have been spoken of. The seals, the trumpets, the personages, and the bowls are a sequence of judgments that take place in the interval between the end of the church age and the second coming proper. Christ will have taken the church up out of the way, and then come seven seals, seven trumpets, seven persons, seven bowls. I believe that these four central judgment sequences are all climactic, looking toward the second coming of Christ. That as we back up now and take a look at the seven trumpets, we're going to be looking at events that primarily have to do with the second half of this tribulation period. When we look at the seven personages, it gets more difficult to interpret, but they are all involved with the concluding events of history immediately before the second coming of Christ. The seven bowl judgments are the climactic, destructive events of the very end of the 70th week of Daniel, the tribulation period. All of these are looking toward this vertical arrow, the second coming of Christ. The last things, the millennium, the final judgments, the new heaven and the new earth, the new Jerusalem, the beginning of eternity, don't happen until after the second coming. This chart represents what we call the pre-millennial theory of end time events, and that's clear from a study of this book of Revelation. When you read through this, it's obvious that during the seals and trumpets and persons and bowls, Christ hasn't returned yet. We're seeing the human race under the wrath of God. Then the second coming happens, and the tribulation ends, and the kingdom age begins. So it's really clear, looking at the pattern that we just have on the page here, that the second coming happens prior to the millennial kingdom, and that the millennial kingdom is not the church age. That's really clear. So the Roman Catholic and medieval eschatology is simply wrong, and the Reformed allegorical eschatology is just wrong. The pattern is clear. And there's a time of wrath and judgment, followed by the second coming, which introduces the millennial kingdom and the end times. So that's where we are. We're going to take a look at the seven trumpets next week, and there'll be even more apocalyptic images because it just gets worse. Again, as we get into the seven trumpets, we're going to find out there's a sequence of four, then a sequence of two, and then a concluding trumpet in the series. The seven trumpets are not related to the trumpet that introduces the rapture. This is not a single angel blowing one trumpet and introducing the rapture event. This is 7 separate angels blowing 7 trumpets of wrath, of destruction, of catastrophe. So that's where we'll go next week. We'll see if we can't understand some of the details of that. It gets worse. It really does. The trumpets are all crushingly bad events. And we'll try to understand those and unpack some of the imagery of that section next week. Hey, it's been fun. Let me see if I can get, there we go. We're out of it. Yeah, let's see if I can get this. There we go. Now we can say bye-bye to everybody. Thank you all for coming. I do appreciate this. It's a neat thing to be a part of a technology that makes it possible to share the good news with the entire world all at one time. It's cool. And anybody who says otherwise is just not paying attention. The saints of 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago would love to have had this. They could have changed the world with what we have available to us.
Yeah.
Instead, we've had 2,000 years of learning how to do it just in time for the end of history as we know it. Perhaps. If it goes on another 1,000 years or two, which is possible, imagine what new destructive technology scientists will have come up with. It strains my credibility a bit to think that evil men will put off destroying the earth for another 1,000 years. Since they have the technology now, it would surprise me if somebody, some idiot with a big red button on his desk doesn't push it. And perhaps some Iranian mullah will get the bug and decide today's the day. We're all going to die. And when that happens, I don't believe we'll be here. But that's just me. That's my theology talking. I think that makes the best sense. So we'll see you again next week. Love you all.
The time will be different for the Philippines.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Donna. The time in Italy will still be 8:30 in the evening. The time in the Philippines will be 3:30 in the morning instead of 2:30, because the U.S. goes on daylight time this coming Sunday, and Italy won't go on daylight time until the end of March. I think it's Easter Sunday that Italy goes on daylight time. So we'll have a slightly offset thing for the Philippines for a couple of weeks there. Okay. So we'll see you next week, and trust that you will stay well. God bless everyone. Love you guys.
Thank you.
Godspeed, everyone. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, Dr. John. Ciao, ciao.
Raj.
Yeah.